So our river flows through a marvelous watershed between the Pocono Mountains and the Endless Mountains in northeastern Pennsylvania. It's a 350 square mile watershed, and it covers parts of 4 counties. Rises at the headwaters up in Ararat Township and in Wayne County and Susquehanna County, north of Forest City. It flows down through the Lackawanna Valley, through Carbondale and Archbald and Elephant and through Scranton and down through Taylor and Old Forge, and flows into Luzerne County and into the Susquehanna River at Duryea, just north of the city of Pittston. So it makes us part of the great Susquehanna River watershed and the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So we came to look at the river back in the 1980s, when there were opportunities that arose with the arrival of the National Park Service in Scranton to create the Steamtown National Historic Site. There were also initiatives that eventually led to the incorporation of our community organization to protect the Lackawanna River. So I got involved because I had worked in the rail industry, and I became a volunteer on a committee with the National Park Service developing the plan for Steamtown. And there I met other people who also had an interest in the outdoors and in the environment of northeastern Pennsylvania, and having grown up here, I had lots of experiences with the Lackawanna River, and like many people, we had turned our backs to the river. It had become a dumping ground. It had become an area of waste, and we were using it as a sewer for over 100 years. It was not a healthy place. I spent a lot of time when I was a kid on Roaring Brook up in Dunmore and Elmhurst, and it was the watershed was healthier up there. So I knew what a good watershed could be. When I was 5 years old, we had a hurricane come through, Hurricane Diane. It was a storm of record for the Lackawanna watershed, and it created a lot of flooding. So I had a lifelong interest in the river and its watershed. So I was fortunate to get involved with some folks on those committees with the National Park Service, and that led to the creation of the LRCA as a watershed organization. And over the years, we've developed a series of plans for the Lackawanna River. We looked at the degradation of the river, started working with the local government agencies, the sewer authorities, EPA and DEP, finding better ways for our local sewer agencies to stop dumping stuff in the river. We started working on interfacing with the community to bring people to the river. We discovered there were old abandoned railroads along the river that could be turned into hiking trails. And we led the way with the planning for the Lackawanna River Heritage Trail, which is now several sections of it are developed and open to the community here in Scranton and in the Mid-Valley and in the Upper Valley through the Rail Trail Council. We have over 30 miles of the 40 miles of the Lackawanna River that have trails developed on it. But it's a big watershed. There's lots of issues across the watershed. We sort of created a conservation corps, and we look at planning and regional work in the watershed through the different districts that are sort of a combination of school district boundaries and the geologic boundaries that the mountains on either side of the valley help to create. But I'll just take a little tour through some of the sections of the watershed. North Pocono is to our east along Roaring Brook and Spring Brook, which are two of the largest tributaries of the Lackawanna River. Our major drinking water supplies come from that region. Elmhurst Reservoir, Lake Scranton, the Watrous and Nesbitt reservoirs are all fed from springs and wetlands out on the Pocono Plateau that flow east through the Moosic Mountains. And we're looking here at Cobb's Gap, the water gap between Dunmore and Elmhurst along Roaring Brook, looking at some of the headwater streams and one of the reservoirs. The lower Lackawanna is a real surprise. We have an Orange River down in Old Forge. We have had 150 years of anthracite, coal mining, and industrial development along our watershed. Underneath us is a maze of underground mine voids, larger than the subway system under Manhattan. And it's filled with water, which is good. It won't catch on fire. But that water has to go somewhere. When the mining companies shut down, and the reason they shut down was not because of the Knox mine disaster, you may have heard of that. In 1959, miners were working for an illegal coal operation in Pittston, and the Susquehanna, they were mining under the bed of the Susquehanna River, and it caved in, and 12 miners were lost in the Knox mine disaster. And it flooded the mines from Pittston to Wilkes-Barre. But the basic root cause of the failure of the anthracite industry, aside from the fact that it's a dirty carbon fuel, and people were using cleaner carbon fuels like oil and natural gas, was the fact that you had to pump water out of the mines. For every ton of coal, you had to pump several hundred tons of water. And the cost of pumping exceeded the price you could get for a ton of coal in 1957. So one by one, the coal companies started shutting down. The last operating company was operating everybody else's pumps to keep their mine dry. And they said, what are we doing? We're losing money. So they notified the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on November 1st, 1961, click, 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 they shut off all the pumps. Over the winter of 61 and 62, that mine system from Pittston to Duryea to Old Forge to Scranton to Archibald to Carbondale to Forest City gradually filled with water. Some of it came from groundwater, some of it came from fractures in the bed of the river itself, and many of the tributary streams. There are some streams that the stream beds are dry, they've been totally eviscerated by mining activities, and there's no water in them because it all flows down into the mines. We estimate about 210 billion gallons of water in the mines under the Lackawanna Valley. That's a water body 3 times the size of Lake Wallenpaupack. And it all comes out at Old Forge. When the pumps were shut off, the mine filled with water. Water was coming out mine shafts and air shafts and boreholes everywhere in the valley. And to relieve that water pressure and stop the damage to public and private infrastructure, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania drilled a borehole in the riverbed at Old Forge, 42-inch borehole, 107 feet deep, and that was drilled between May and September 1962. 60 years ago, they punched it open, and that water has been flowing into the river at an average rate of about 55 to 60 million gallons a day. It's got about 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of iron oxide, manganese, zinc, copper, aluminum, oxides and sulfides in solution. You hold it up in a beaker and it's crystal clear. Add a few drops of peroxide to it and you start to see a precipitation. So that precipitation occurs in the water column, and all that iron drops out as a precipitate sludge, coats the bottom of the river all the way downstream into the Susquehanna River. It's been called one of the largest single point sources of visible water pollution in the entire Chesapeake Bay. And it's on my river. We've been working with lots of agencies over the years. We developed a study in 2012, the Lower Lackawanna River Watershed Restoration Plan, and we identified methodologies to solve this pollution problem. But we determined that there's not enough federal dollars even in the mine reclamation program, and there's plenty of new money coming in through the infrastructure bills that Congress has recently passed. But there's also not enough interest in the private sector to be able to solve that. But maybe bringing the public and private sectors together might be a solution. So we proposed what we're calling an eco-industrial park be developed in an area of several thousand acres of abandoned minelands in the Old Forge, Duryea area. And we do have some private sector interest on a very interesting and challenging energy project to derive energy from a pump storage hydroelectric program that's being proposed here that would utilize the water in the mine pool to fill pump storage reservoirs and actually pay for cleaning the mine water. So we're right in the beginning of that. We've been working with some private investors for about 5 years now. We're not there yet, but we're still working on it. There's a whole bunch of areas down there we call the Duryea swamps, where those trees are growing. They're flooded topsoil pits. And there's the confluence of the Lackawanna the Susquehanna River by that railroad bridge going over to West Pittston. So up through the urban area of the watershed, through Scranton and Dunmore, we've got some really great resources. Here we've got a view of Music Mountain looking down into the community. We've got marvelous habitats. The Nature Conservancy has got the Eels Preserve up on part of Music Mountain, but we've got more Music Mountain that needs to be protected. We've got old reservoirs like the Dunmore No. 1 reservoir over there on Tige Street in Dunmore. And of course, beautiful Nayok Falls in Nayok Park. We just recently developed, and it's just a 10 or 15 minute walk from here, a project called Sweeney's Beach down on the river in Pine Brook, just off Poplar Street. We took an area of 5 acres that was owned by the city but wasn't accessible. There was an old railroad grade. The railroad grade, the tracks were removed to access a playing field for Lackawanna College, and we developed an easement with the college and went to the city and said, hey, we can access this land that you couldn't access before because of the railroad tracks. We want to lease it for $1 a year. We did that. It gave us equity. We developed it into a park. So I'd like to invite you all down to Sweeney's Beach and enjoy the river. It's a great place to go to meditate. It's a great place to go to listen to the river and pause and collect yourself and renew yourself. It's one of my favorite spots on the river. Up in the mid-valley, we have, again, old reservoirs, wonderful waterfalls. These are some of the tributary streams. One of these creeks is Eddy Creek that comes off Music Mountain. Before it gets to go under the Casey Highway, it goes into a hole in the creek bed and it comes out down Old Forge. So we're trying to encourage the Department of Environmental Protection, mine reclamation folks to develop a reclamation plan for that and get that water to run down into the Lackawanna River. But the creek bed has been totally obliterated. So we have a $23 million project to restore that creek that we've been advocating for. And we've got some great kayaking and whitewater activity on the river. The river's up right now. It's around 3.5 feet today. It was up around 5.5 to 6, 7 feet a few days ago, and with all the rain. And we got close to flood stage. They closed the floodgates in Scranton. But if you ever want to go kayaking on the river, there's some great put-ins and takeouts. Sweeney's Beach is a good place to land if you want to launch up in the mid-valley and end up down in Scranton. You can go to our website, www.lrca.org, and click on river gauges. If the Archibald gauge is between 2.5 and 3.5 feet, conditions are perfect for kayaking. If it's below 2.5 feet, down to maybe 2.2 feet, you can still kayak, but you'll be shinning your buns off the rocks. Below 2.2 feet, I wouldn't bother. But the fishing is great. Up in the Abingtons, we just developed a long-range plan for Leggett's Creek, which goes up through the notch, and we're proposing a route that'll probably need to build some high lines like the trail system in Manhattan to get people to be able to walk and bicycle safely through the notch between the Abingtons and the metropolitan part of the valley. We've been doing a lot of research and education over the years, as seen of one of our biologists a few years ago and some students and adult volunteers collecting and analyzing macroinvertebrates in the waters of Leggett's Creek. Up in the Carbondale area, we have the trailhead for the D&H trail system that actually goes up out of the Lackawanna Watershed and over into Lanesboro, all the way up on the Susquehanna River at the New York state line. That's a 40-mile trail up there. But we still have the legacy of anthracite coal mining operations. We have a silt basin here on Powderly Creek in Carbondale. That's 40 feet of anthracite coal silt. They had a big coal operation there where they washed the coal. They built a pond on the creek. They took the water out of the pond, washed the coal, dumped the dirty water back in. The sediment over 50 years built up. And then when the mines went out of business, they breached the dam and the creek just meandered down through the silt. And every time it rains, it washes bedloads and bedloads of silt, fine black anthracite silt down into the river. And we've been trying to get that site reclaimed. The Mine Reclamation Agency needs the participation of the property owners, and the property owners said, well, we were going to mine that silt someday, but not now. So it's still sitting there. We're hoping to get that addressed in the next 10 or 15 years. So in the upper end of the watershed, above Forest City, we have a beautiful pristine area. The headwaters, there's a dam, Stillwater Dam, built by the Corps of Engineers where the east and west branches come together at Uniondale, and from there 40 miles down through the valley to Pittston. But above there is some of the prettiest country in this part of the world. So we're an active volunteer community organization. We are welcoming membership. We're going to have a cleanup that we're partnering with the United Neighborhood Centers on over in Pine Brook this coming Saturday. I'll have other volunteers down at the Courthouse Square with the county for an Earth Day tabling event. And I brought some literature with me. It's out in the lobby. We welcome your participation with our programs, and again, very thankful to join you here this evening.